Welcome to Puget Sound Book Artists Lunchtime Lectures with Allie, Alvis. I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. The PSBA is committed to diversity, inclusion, and equity work. As an organization based in Tacoma, Washington, we acknowledge the Puyallup tribe and invite you to visit the official website of the Puyallup and listen to their land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. The Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step towards true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond.
Thank you so much, Lori, and welcome back to our Zoom lunchtime conversations. On behalf of the Puget Sound Book Artists, I'm so happy to welcome you to our fall presentation. I'd like to thank Lori again for all of her great moderation with Zoom. And today I'm so pleased to be joined by my former University of Puget Sound colleague, who's also a Jane Connolly, who is our archivist and special collections librarian. We are so happy to introduce our amazing speaker, Allie Alvis, book historian, curator of special collections at the world-renowned Winterthur Library in Delaware.
Hi, everyone. I am so pleased to be here today and to meet Allie. Some of you might have joined us last Sunday at Collins Library, where we shared a very, Jane Carlin and I shared a very abbreviated history of books. Visitors had a chance to view some of our unique and special collections. And having Allie as a follow-up to that event really built our understanding of book history. So we're very excited to have her here. If you haven't visited her Instagram, Book Historia, yet, I guarantee you will after today's presentation. At last count, I believe there were over 254,000 followers.
I just cracked 255 today.
All right, even better. Allie brings the unique collections of Winterthur to life, and today I know she will inspire us all.
Allie was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, and has always had a deep love for the history of books, and as stated in her own words, for old stuff. They received an undergraduate degree in linguistics from the University of Kansas, a master's in library science and book history from the University of Edinburgh, and a master's in information management from the University of Glasgow. Pretty impressive. Allie's website provides links to so many great presentations and podcasts that focus on her love of books and history.
Allie has worked in the Smithsonian Libraries and Archives Special Collections as a rare book cataloger, and currently is recognized as a Rare Book School Fellow for Diversity, Inclusion, and Cultural Heritage, where they provide guidance and mentorship to others in the program. I think this statement from her website sums it up. Allie loves to talk about books. Seriously, social media, lectures, talks, articles, videos, you name it. Their priority is to make the world of rare books more accessible. And no doubt that's what they are going to be doing for all of us today. Please join us in welcoming Allie.
Thank you very much, Janes. You can probably tell because the background is so brown, but I'm blushing very much. I am going to give you the old boring Zoom slideshow for a bit, and then we will move on to the fun stuff. I promise. I have a whole setup. I've pulled way too many items from the Winterthur Library to talk about, but we'll do our best to get through them. But first of all, the wonders of the Winterthur Library. So this is sort of a loosely themed presentation, just highlighting books that I think are cool and interesting for whatever reason, either aesthetically or structurally. They are just beautiful and they kind of have always caught my attention. I would like to start this presentation by saying that when I was little, I didn't want to be a librarian. I wanted to be an artist. I mention this because I think my early artistic inclination informs the kinds of library material I most love to share about. The dynamic, the eye-catching, and the weird. Some of you may know me as Book Historia from Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and YouTube, let's just say social media, where I highlight these kinds of books and more, including from where I am curator of special collections here at the Winterthur Library. As curator, I have the unique joy of both buying new cool stuff for the collection and using the collection to engage all sorts of audiences. One such audience that we have been particularly focused on in the past several years is artists across every media, particularly through our Maker Creator Fellowship that runs every year, which I will definitely talk more about in a bit. But back to the Winterthur Library. How did we wind up with over 1 million items spanning 5 centuries, from ephemera to the high points of decorative arts? This presentation is going to be primarily show and tell based. I promise I will shut up soon. But before I get to that stuff, I want to give you some context for the place that I like to call Epcot for historians. So, what Winterthur? Winterthur is the premier museum of American decorative arts. Its unparalleled collection of nearly 90,000 objects displayed in a magnificent 175-room house. And I will say those objects are a different collection from the library collection. The library collection is bigger. So don't be fooled by the fact that the subtitle of Winterthur is Museum, Garden, and Library. In my opinion, the library is really where it's at. Winterthur is also 1,000 acres of protected meadows, woodlands, ponds, and waterways, with 60 acres of manicured garden. And finally, Winterthur is a library. The Winterthur Library is an internationally renowned, as Lori mentioned, or Jane, someone mentioned how wonderful Winterthur is, and I very much agree. Independent academic research library dedicated to documenting, understanding, and engaging the artistic, cultural, social, and intellectual history of the Americas in a global context from the 17th to the 20th centuries. Winterthur. This is our father, so to speak, H.F. DuPont. Winterthur was established as a museum, garden, and library by Henry Francis DuPont, the final private occupant of the house that now forms the bulk of the museum. The DuPont family is famous for their eponymous company, founded in 1802 by Eleuthère Irénée DuPont, often called EI because we don't want to be saying that all the time. EI established the outfit to develop land and produce gunpowder, and later generations shifted its focus to chemistry and the automotive world. Unlike some of his more industrially minded family members, HF found himself drawn more towards agriculture, horticulture, and American material history, and he had the generational wealth and resources to create the collection of his dreams. He became one of the leading figures in the history of American decorative arts, and even helmed the First Lady's Fine Arts Committee, which oversaw restoration of the White House in 1961. Winterthur. As HF's collections grew, he began to open up his home to fellow collectors, as well as people who wanted to research the history of American decorative art. In 1951, he converted the main house on the Winterthur grounds, which you can see here, into a full-time public museum, and he moved to a smaller home on the property. In 1952, HF established a joint master's degree program in American material culture with the University of Delaware, with the help of curator Charles F. Montgomery. The Winterthur Library was established the same year, with the heart of the collection expanded and curated by Frank Summer, who I will talk more about in a bit. He is the first Winterthur librarian. Henry Francis DuPont passed away in 1969, the same year that the building that I'm in was finished. Winterthur. So you might think the word Winterthur is Swiss because there is a Winterthur in Switzerland, It is based on the ancestral home of one of the DuPont's relatives. He actually named it after the town where his family was from. But this Winterthur is located just outside Wilmington, Delaware, on a plot of land that has been owned by the DuPont family since 1811. The main house was constructed between 1839 and 1842 at the behest of Jacques-Antoine Biederman, who was the fellow who actually named it Winterthur. He was Eleuthère Irénée's business partner and cousin, and husband of Evelina Gabrielle DuPont, who was EI's daughter. The DuPonts owned most of the land in this region for generations, in fact, with other DuPont historical sites in the area, including Hagley, which encompasses the original DuPont gunpowder mill, Longwood Gardens, and the Nemours estate. Winterthur is both part of the city of Wilmington and its own community. Some members of staff reside in housing on the property, and we even have our own zip code and post office. But why Tertur? The library's roots go back to Pierre Samuel DuPont, the progenitor of the American DuPonts, who bought a large portion of his library with him when he emigrated from France to the US in the 18th century. But the collection's strengths today are due in large part to HF's vision for his advanced study in the decorative arts. The library's modern foundations lay in HF's careful planning. He recognized the need for a scholarly research library that would support a graduate program in material culture and connoisseurship, the first year course of which you can see here in really spectacular 1950s style, using no book supports for these 18th century items, which we don't do that anymore. So understanding the context of the study of objects in the museum, so his huge collection of American decorative arts furniture, and putting them into a broader global context, providing and to support students in this newly formed graduate program in early American material culture. The early collecting foundations laid by DuPont were taken up by Frank Summer and Charles Montgomery in the 1950s, and succeeding generations of collecting librarians thereafter, including myself, resulting in what today is recognized as one of the strongest collections for the study of American decorative arts, material culture, and everyday life in America from the 1600s to the mid-20th century. This is a snapshot of the Memorial Library, which is actually in the house. The Winterthur Library now is located in a purpose-built space. We have stacks that go up over 5 floors, but when people come to Winterthur, they expect to see this, which is very much the sort of ideal library. But let's rewind a little bit. In 1951, Frank Summer was a 28-year-old newly minted professor establishing himself at the University of Delaware, boasting degrees in archaeology from Yale and Cambridge. It was there he caught the eye of Charles F. Montgomery, who was then Winterthur's associate curator and executive secretary. Montgomery was simultaneously engaged in opening Winterthur as a public museum and in building the graduate program with the University of Delaware, and he tapped Summer to help expand the Winterthur's book collection to one befitting the research needs of the incoming master students. Summer became Montgomery's book hound, spending the summer of 1952 in Europe, purchasing high points of decorative arts at post-World War II prices. In August 1952, in a letter to Montgomery, Summer remarked that he was, quote, deliciously wallowing in books, books, books. The course next term should be a humdinger if I can do my materials justice. After several weeks of frantic letters back and forth across the Atlantic, granting Summer permission to purchase some title or another, Montgomery, with HF's support, granted Summer the equivalent of a blank check. This wire, which we hold in the Winterthur archives, that states that he could purchase books to his heart's desire. This is authorization for you to order any books you find essential for the university library. So, you know, go forth and buy things you think are appropriate. Summer's background in archaeology is the puzzle piece that ultimately led to the Winterthur Library's remarkable collection of a little bit, or a lot, of everything. He understood that collecting high points, while important to establishing the foundation of a course about decorative arts and material culture, only preserved a narrow part of history. It would be like excavating King Tut's tomb and only paying attention to the sarcophagus and burial mask, ignoring the rest of the amazing material that gives us a glimpse of the wider world in which he died. Summer's progressive thinking about more vernacular material, such as trade literature, ephemera, and working manuscripts, meant that he was able to acquire it for a song long before most other institutions began collecting it seriously. Later in his career, he recalled a conversation with a librarian of a large and important rare book library, who, when told the kind of material Summer was actively acquiring, quipped, "Oh, reference material." Those that followed in Summer's footsteps continued to cultivate the library's collection, particularly Richard McKinstry. While Summer laid the philosophical groundwork for Winterthur seriously collecting material that was a little off-center of what you might expect to find in a serious library, McKinstry made it one of the world's best collections. In his 40-year tenure at the library, McKinstry brought in thousands of new acquisitions. His professional fascination with ephemera brought the John and Carolyn Grossman collection, which I will highlight a few pieces of, to the Winterthur Library, which on its own is a world-class collection of ephemera. And our collection continues to expand to this day. One of my favorite recent purchases is this sales sample book of Czech glass from the Jablonec Company, produced in the 1950s. It is currently on display in my new exhibit called That Pleasing Art, Color in Theory and Practice, which will be on show right out front of the library until March of next year. It's all about the use of color in science and art. But now the good stuff. Let me stop sharing. I've pulled a variety of visually interesting items that I hope will be of interest to you as book artists and people interested in books as objects. All of these are available to be seen by any researcher, whether they're an artist, an academic, or a member of the public. You can find descriptions of them in our online catalog, which is called Wintercat. So, as I said, I have probably pulled too many things. And most of the time, you're probably not going to be able to see my face here, so I might just stop my facial video. Yeah, there we go. So we can focus on the books. Okay. So starting with this item, this is the sort of uncreatively named Doc 735. It is part of our manuscript collection. It is Thomas Earle's exercise book, and it was created in the 1720s in New Jersey. So this is a stunning example of basically a cipher book. And a cipher book is not like a book of codes or something. It is just kind of a fancy name for an arithmetic book. But this is no student's arithmetic book. This is the teacher's book from which he was teaching. So you see these really accomplished examples of decoration and of calligraphy. It opens with the mariner's compass. I can hold this up a little closer. But I mean, look at this incredible knotwork initial. Let's get it set back up there. So this contains lessons on algebra, geometry, trigonometry, navigation, mapping, and astronomy. So the majority of it is things like this, where it is a sort of beautiful example of penmanship, but not, you know, pictorially something that would blow you away. It does have, you know, these lovely geometric diagrams. I really love these globes. Great examples of how iron gall ink eats through the pages. Iron gall ink would have been the sort of go-to ink for writing and for creating these books at the time. And the iron in it actually reacts with the paper, dissolving it. So sometimes the iron content is higher than others. You can see in these really dark ghosts from the other side. Meanwhile, the ink used to write the majority of the text was a bit more stable. But I just cannot get over the complexity of these initials. You can just really tell that he had fun with it. And you see that a lot in these cipher books. I don't know if it's because people didn't want to be learning math. I know that feeling. But they really have fun with the handwriting practice side of things. Here is another map. We have Ethiopia here. I believe, where are we here? Yes, so this is not terribly accurate map. We have South America here. Terra Incognita. I think that might be Antarctica, but it's just gorgeous. Let's skip ahead a little bit. So he eventually gets out of geometric diagrams and makes these lovely sort of pseudo volvels. So a volvel is basically a paper instrument, which usually has like a dial that you would be able to spin around. But he didn't go so far as to create a functional dial. He just made this diagram to sort of gesture towards the tools that his students would be using when they became ship's navigators or what have you. He also made these gorgeous diagrams of the different theories of the solar system. So we have the Ptolemaic system and the Copernican system. Copernicus with the sun at the center, Ptolemy with the earth at the center. And, you know, they're so beautiful. Just the detail that's been put into these with the little star signs here. Then the Tychonian system. And the Fundamental Diagram for Astronomy by T.E. So again, that's Thomas Earl. And he created this in 1727. He was living in New Jersey at the time, where he was a schoolmaster. But even these little charts have decorations on them. And it's such a testament to the sort of human experience and the human desire to make stuff pretty, even if it's not terribly interesting. And he did not use the whole book, which in itself is interesting because he started to line these pages, but he never really got around to finishing it. And the binding is really interesting. You can see how the supports are super long and glued to the boards, and it is a scale board binding, a pretty big one. And you can see the board peeking through there. But he has his initials on the cover. That is item number 1. So I'm going to focus, I think, on the book-shaped items, and then I will move on to the less book-shaped items. This is an item from the Grossman collection that I mentioned, the Grossman collection of ephemera. It is not just ephemera. It contains everything from trade material to children's books. It's a little bit of everything 19th century. It comes up through the early 20th century, but primarily 19th century. John and Carolyn Grossman had a vast empire of Victorian merchandising. They were single-handedly responsible for the resurgence of that style in the 90s. But they have other things, such as, does this actually have anything in it? Oh, yeah. So this is a nice little preview of what's to come. These are samples of foil. So I won't give too much away, but I will just open the book. So this is a sales sample book of foil ornaments. These would be either sewn onto vestments, in this case in the church, or used for decoration in homes. They are sewn onto the pages. So each of them have little tiny stitches, and you can kind of see on this side they've impressed themselves onto the facing pages. But the pages themselves are pretty thick. So that's kind of why it has survived for this long. And then another piece is pasted over the back to sort of disguise the stitches. You can see the sort of threads that have been revealed by rubbing the facing pages. But that sample of foil in the initial piece there, usually you would buy these ornaments sort of like this in a silver. And then you could apply that very thin foil over the silver. So you could say like, oh, I want this one, but I want it to be that color. And you could very easily order that. Unfortunately, we don't know what company this belonged to. This, as I said, would be a sales sample catalog. So it would be not necessarily something that you would see on the counter of a shop, but would be someone working for the manufacturer of these ornaments, taking them to buyers for different shops. And those buyers would then stock like little jars or little drawers of individual examples of these that people could buy and use for their decorations. But it's just every single page is incredible. They're all very thin, so the book itself is somewhat heavy, but not as heavy as it could be if these were like, for example, coins or something. But I adore this book. You can see that each of them has a little stock number. So that would be used again by the salesperson and the customers to say like, okay, I want a dozen of 5623. I want 3 dozen of 6182. And at the beginning, there was a little price list, some of which you can see here. So I'll just keep flipping through because honestly, they get to be really, really teeny tiny. And these are the sort of predecessors of sequins, these little tiny guys. Before the advent of plastic, if you wanted to have a sparkly dress or something that caught the light, you would use metal sequins, not any other kind of sequins. That means that garments could get pretty heavy, but you can see how these sparkle just with this ring light. You can imagine how amazing it would be by candlelight. And they get very creative with their designs. There's a Medusa head here, a bunch of grapes. I thought this might be a beehive, but I'm not sure now. But they're weird little moon faces. Elephant, pink elephant fish. I love this star page. The way it is noted here, it just makes it look like a shooting star to me. Let me pick this up. And again, you can see that sparkle. It's amazing. These would have been possibly used in military uniforms or police uniforms, gendarmes. But again, these are very flexible sorts of things. They could be on uniforms, they could be on fancy dresses for a costume ball, or they could be on decor for your home. There are more sort of run-of-the-mill ones where they're sort of faceted, some buttons. The binding on this is really funky, and I need to give it to our conservators. It's like this external structure. It's semi-Coptic almost. I'll show you the back when I'm done going through it, but you can see, or maybe like an account book type of structure, how the gatherings are kind of sewn actually through the spine. So one of the threads has broken, and that's kind of ruined the whole shebang. But here's some more very creative shapes. Green birds in love, and bugs, and more birds, eagles, flowers. Then we get back to these big ones. We have the little French badge there. You can buy every letter of the alphabet. Some more religious examples, which actually have inset glass pieces to give them that extra sparkle. And again, you can just see them sparkling. Really love these grapes. It's like the most beautiful book in the world. I love getting this out. It's just stunning. Oh, you can kind of see here the structure. So the gatherings have been sewn through the sort of material of the case binding. And since that is coming apart, the whole thing is saying, well, nice knowing you. But one of the wonderful things about Winterthur is that we have a very robust conservation program here. So we have the degree in American material culture, but we also have a degree in art conservation. So we not only have a dedicated book conservator, which is kind of a rarity these days, we have students who are just raring to work on weird stuff that comes up. And here is another little sample of sequins and their little prices. These are more little faceted guys. And that is the end of that. If you see anything that catches your eye in here, feel free to put something in the chat to say like, oh, wait, no, go back to that grape. I am more than willing to answer any questions and go back to whatever pages and items you all might be interested in. Has these funny little bosses. But yeah, you can see on the outside, like this is just going. Maybe our bookbinder friends can tell me what structure that is called. I am blanking for some reason. Yeah, we are doing booky things. So on to our next sample book, which is, you know, on the outside, it has seen better days. I don't know if you can tell from the video, this whole spine is a piece of duct tape. Someone tried long stitch. Thank you, Richard. But somebody tried to repair this with duct tape, which you see sometimes. Very unfortunate. We actually have a book in the collection that someone repaired with band-aids, which is terrible. But it sort of disguises the amazing things that are inside it. So this is a sample book of ribbons gathered at the French Great Exhibition. And it is assembled by an individual who actually attended the exhibition. I love these weird little dogs. But a lot of them are silk. They were probably gathered from different international pavilions. Unfortunately, the person who collected them did not label any of them. So it will be an exciting research project, perhaps for a student or a PhD researcher or somebody with more time than I have, because it would be really interesting to figure out, you know, where these came from. And those expositions are so well recorded that, you know, it wouldn't be impossible to figure out what booths had ribbons to take home. Some of the samples are very large, like this one, which is almost a belt. But some of them have such modern designs. Like, that's amazing. That feels like it might be on a dress today. This funny little one with the flies. I'm a big fan of bugs. So when a bug shows up in decorative arts, I'm all about it. This is another one that is super modern to me. Obviously, sort of 1960s. Sarah Beth says, I feel justified in my obsession for keeping lists and journals. Please keep lists and journals. Historians of the future will thank you and praise you very much, because I wish that I knew where these were from. Look at that one. This one I think is one of my favorites. It has that sort of gradation of white to blue. This page is just excellent. And you can see that this person wasn't just collecting sort of the high points. Like, this is just a solid red, which is lovely. But it wasn't like they were only collecting the pretty stuff. They were being very thorough in their collecting. Some more amazing reds. And they really sparkle when you turn the pages. They're brocade, a lot of them. Here's another example where it's not really in your face, but there is a really interesting sort of zigzag weaving pattern inside of it. Like, I could go through this page by page and just show you the whole thing. Flip through real quick. This one is really cool. I really like how they incorporate the thorns of the roses into the design. It's not just the pretty flowers. And again, that feels really modern. Further back, you get into more sort of folk designs, which again would be really interesting to trace. Like this feels like you could identify it to something or somewhere. You can also see how the glue has sort of degraded over the years. I don't know what kind of glue this was, but it's that in itself is a curious sort of research project for conservators and scientists to understand the sort of chemical composition of this stuff. This is a page of fringe. And this is, in the back, there are also clippings from lace patterns. I think that's the only, yeah, there's this larger piece back here. But then it goes into sort of your more traditional scrapbook territory. Someone obviously very interested in lace. And I think these are a little bit later than the initial collection of ribbons, which is fascinating. It just kind of shows that this book was kept around longer than maybe its intended use, but it was treasured. And someone continued to use it for sort of textile arts, whether that is crocheting or knitting or anything else. Flip backwards a little bit. This is also a relatively new acquisition, so it is not in the catalog yet, but it is in the process of being cataloged. And hopefully once it is cataloged, we can also digitize it, because it is just, it's so, so gorgeous. Let's hit up these two Victorian books. So here's Victorian book number 1. This is called Our Darling Surprise Pictures. So the Winterthur Library does not just have degular books with pages, and you just turn the pages and there you go. That's the entire experience. The Grossman collection in particular, with its focus on Victoriana and that sort of material, has these amazing movables. So there is this tab down here, which you push and pull, and it slides overlapping paper over one picture or another. I will lift this up so you can see it. But even in person, it is difficult to see the lines where the next picture will be slipped out of. Make sure I'm holding this properly. There you go. So you can see here, the picture is beginning to appear. And the tab is pulling the initial picture underneath the first picture. And of course, it's a very saccharine Victorian scene of buying dolls on Christmas Day. But the paper engineering is just amazing. This is the picture book fairy, the sweetest that was ever seen. Now find here the little old woman who keeps the moon tidy and clean. Here she is, tidying the moon for whatever reason. Pop-up books and movables like this really had their heyday in the late 19th, early 20th century. That's when they were first being developed as not educational material, but children's toys. So initially, movable books, flap books, things like that, were for scientific education. You could lift the flaps and see, for example, different parts of a body. There were also sort of humorous flap books where you could lift up the flap of a scandalous woman's skirt and find something interesting under there. But this is during the development of children's literature as a genre of thing. It is no longer treating children just like miniature adults, basically, but understanding that children have different interests and different things that they are drawn to. So not only are they having fun with this is kind of like a paper toy. They're learning how to read. They're learning about rhyming. They're learning a little bit about morals. So it's not just straight up and down teaching them stuff and expecting them to have the patience of a full-grown person, but sort of gently guiding them into learning. Robin says, early interactive media. Another example of this kind of book. Magic Moments. This one has seen better days. Good old Victorian paper. Because in this period, they were beginning to use wood pulp paper. The acid content in that paper is much higher than the rag paper that they would have been using in the 18th century. And it's just sort of eating itself and yellowing and becoming brittle. So this one is a little bit more difficult to maneuver. But it's the same concept of one picture sliding over or under another picture. But this one is in a circle. And it has this added sort of visual element of these lines and squiggles that give you a sort of optical illusion. It can be a little stiff. Now it just looks weird. Let's see, where is it catching? Yeah, see, this is completely detached. Well, I will come back for that because I don't want to tug on it. But same deal here, where it's like a star wipe in filmmaking. And this one moves a little smoother. But it's just It's so amazing. Like, can you imagine being a Victorian child and seeing something like this for the first time, having never seen a movie or really color photography? These colors are incredible. I don't know where the ribbon is for that one. There it is. So each of these have a teeny weeny little ribbon attached to it, which is how you pull on it to make the star wipe happen. Since these are all detached from their bindings, move it up a little bit. You can see here it has the sort of lobes through which the pictures can cycle. And this circle is also free spinning. So for the paper engineers out there, that is how that happens. Fox stalking the geese. It feels very psychedelic in a way. Like, you wonder how many of these books that would have been not quite so old in the 1960s that the hippies may have come across and said, like, hey man, that's actually really cool, dude. Wow. It's funny to see how styles come and go. Magic moments. But I mentioned that pop-up books were initially not for children. And this is an example of that. This is Humphrey Repton on the theory and practice of landscape gardening. So Humphrey Repton invented this term, landscape gardener. He was a designer of landscapes, very much like an architect would design homes. But Repton was also a master marketer. He became very well known for, let's see if I can find a good one here, what he called his red books. And these red books were so called because they were red in color. But they became kind of his calling card. And they were special in that he produced them for each of his projects for his customers, to say, you know, this is what your home looks like now, but this is what it could look like if you hire me. So it's this amazing liftable flap before and after. All of these are hand-colored illustrations. This book was published in, let's see, did I write that down? Repton did most of his work in the 1790s, but he did these compilation books in the 19th century. This one is from 1816. And it's full of these examples, and that's gorgeous. Could have used that in my color exhibit, of these liftable flaps of before and after. So these are actually hinged in. The backs are obviously blank because they are engravings, but there are little tabs, which I don't know if you can see in this camera. They're sort of here. And that is how the flap is actually secured to the page. So when you lift it, it has this great effect. And this book is full of them. It's full of lovely illustrations that are beautiful in their own right. Approach to Woburn Abbey. That is just a work of art. Very neo-Gothic. I love this flower garden. Here's another before and after. And it can be hard to see where the lifting points are because they are so unified and beautiful. Yeah. So this could be yours if you hire Humphrey Repton. I see that we are kind of drawing to a close. So I will close Humphrey here, move these. And this is not just a beautiful manila workspace. this is full of folding fans. So this is just a fraction of the material in the Grossman collection of ephemera. And it's just hundreds of examples of these beautiful, fragile paper pieces of art. That many of them are the best surviving examples in the world. Some of these animal ones are really funny. Each leave of the fan for a different couple of months. Doggies, kitties, sort of alternating. And they are structured sort of with the classic fan brad in there. But the die cut art on them is amazing. Like, I don't think that this would be a terribly functional fan. This would not be very good at moving air around, but it is beautiful. And it's just really a work of art. I mean, when you think of a library, you often first think, oh, books. But particularly the Winterthur Library is so much more than books. And it's wonderful to sort of have the books in this wider context of the production of paper materials and sort of the material culture of everyday life. So we have this fellowship program that runs every year. Applications are not yet open, but will be in November. For more information, you can email me at aalvis@winterthur.org. If you feel inspired by these items, please think of applying. It is a really, really wonderful opportunity. $2,500 per month isn't bad. We have had lots of different artists in different media. We've had composers, we've had poets, we have had not many paper artists. We've had some book artists, but you know, if you are in the headspace to think of a project that could tie into Winterthur collections, please let us know. I would be happy to walk you through the application process and to connect you with others. So that is a wrap for me. I know that we're a little low on time, but I am happy to take any questions.
Allie, this is Jane again, and I just want to thank you. I think I can speak for everyone on the Zoom meeting that your selection of items is amazing. And I think this Maker Creator Fellowship is so inspiring. I can guarantee quite a few book artists are already going to contact you. Loved your presentation. For the librarians on the program, that blank check to purchase any book that you want early on in your presentation was a dream come true. But what really struck me about your presentation, I think it's so interesting for us to ponder, and maybe we can do this in a repeat opportunity to listen to you, is connecting books with ephemera and the whole connection between material and print culture. And I think that is just something so important to explore. What are we doing right now in our libraries to collect ephemera that is being made today for generations of the future? And you have inspired us all. So we are at time, but might I ask you just one question? And I know it's very, very unfair, but do you have a favorite rare book or educational moment that you've experienced with scholars or students at Winterthur?
I mean, the wonderful thing about Winterthur and about this job in general is, you know, I spend a lot of time sitting at the front desk, actually being on the ground, so to speak, with people coming in, asking research questions, people who just accidentally come across the library, they didn't know it was here, and being able to sort of give them the elevator pitch on what a research library is. But I think my favorite instances of sort of rare book librarianship are when someone who has seen my books on my Instagram reaches out either through DM or through email, and they say, I've never been to a rare book reading room before, but I want to see this stuff. How do I do that? Do I need to be like someone special? Do I need to have a PhD? And I'm like, no, come in. And having those people who this is their very first reading room experience, and sort of being that for them and being able to invite people to experience special collections in a less intimidating way. I love being able to facilitate those kinds of experiences. I know that you think of special collections and you think of stuff like this. Like you think of old books, you think of brown spines and leather books, and like they're nice, they are pretty, they are dark academia, they're aesthetic. But a lot of people see books like this and they think like, oh, that's not for me. I wouldn't be reading that 18th century encyclopedia. Like, why would I have any interest in this whatsoever? And through showing the sort of weirder, more wonderful things that we have in the library special collections, I feel like, or I hope, it is expanding the sort of stereotype of what special collections have in them. It's not just brown books. It's weird Victorian fans and books of ribbons and ornaments and just all sorts of weird things. So yeah, that's my favorite part of the job.
Thank you. So inspiring. And I do want to have a shout out to Jane Connolly, because I know she takes that into her classes at the Puget Sound. And we're just so thankful that you were able to join us. And for everybody on the call, this program will be recorded and soon to be available on our Puget Sound Book Artist website. And I hope that we can invite you back for round 2. It's so great. I know I'm already booking a ticket to the East Coast.
Well, I can't wait to see you. You know where to
Lori,
find
thank you so much. Jane, great to see you. And for everybody on the call, thank you. And thank you to Puget Sound Book Artists for sponsoring this presentation.
Thank you all for
Allie.
having me.